lights inside the arena for Monday Night Raw dimmed slowly and the entire atmosphere shifted from loud, energetic excitement to an uneasy silence that spread through the crowd like wildfire. Fans who had already witnessed a brutal main event thought the show had given them its final shock of the night, but they could not have been more wrong because what unfolded behind the curtain was far more explosive than anything that had happened in the ring. The Titantron flickered, the cameras cut backstage, and what viewers saw immediately raised the tension in the building to a fever pitch. Roman Reigns, the tribal chief himself, was walking through the corridors. His posture was strong, his walk deliberate, his shoulders squared in the way that has made him the symbol of dominance for years, but his eyes gave away a different story. Behind that aura of confidence there was a glimmer of unease, the look of a man carrying the weight of leadership and the constant threats that come with being the face of the company. He was fresh out of the locker room, his focus razor sharp, when suddenly, without warning, the shadow of a monster emerged. From the darkened corners where no spotlight had reached, Brock Lesnar appeared, not announced, not heralded by music, not accompanied by his usual roar of the crowd. This time the beast came silent, his footsteps low, his presence more terrifying than any entrance pyrotechnics could deliver. And then, in an instant, chaos erupted. Brock Lesnar struck Roman Reigns with a vicious blow that caught him completely off guard, sending the tribal chief reeling. A steel chair clattered into frame, hurled with violent force and smashing into Roman's body. The attack was unrelenting, savage, and filled with the kind of intensity that only Brock Lesnar can deliver. Security scrambled from every direction, officials screamed into headsets, camera crews ran to capture every angle, and the Titantron showed the live destruction to the stunned WWE Universe. Fans gasped, some screamed, some held their heads in disbelief, and the commentary team could hardly keep up with the storm unfolding before their eyes. This wasn't just a brawl backstage, it was a seismic shock to the foundations of WWE storytelling. For weeks there had been hints that something like this might happen. Roman had been talking in promos about his invincibility, his bloodline's unbreakable resilience, and the dynasty he was building, but Brock Lesnar had grown increasingly agitated with being overshadowed. Reports from inside the locker room suggested that Lesnar was frustrated with his role as a surprise attraction rather than a constant threat. He wanted to be seen as the monster who could not just end matches but rewrite narratives. Roman's dominance had made him the immovable force at the top of the company, and Brock, with his pride and his hunger, was ready to prove he was still the immovable object that no champion could ignore. Teases of this explosion had been sprinkled throughout recent episodes of Raw. The way Roman clenched his jaw when Brock's name was mentioned, the way he stared at the monitor backstage when Lesnar appeared on screen, the subtle tension in every camera shot, it all built to this ambush. The production team captured it perfectly. Silence before the storm, then a sudden eruption of violence. Roman staggered under the first blows, his ribs absorbing the impact of the steel chair, his head snapping back from another crushing strike. Brock followed with shoulder tackles that sent the tribal chief crashing into walls and equipment cases, and then perhaps the most terrifying moment of all, a suplex delivered on unforgiving concrete or cold steel props. Officials poured into the scene but Brock, after making his point, simply backed away with a smirk of satisfaction, his chest heaving, his eyes cold and merciless. The Titantron replayed the attack in slow motion, showing every brutal detail, the chair colliding with Roman's body, the anguish on his face, the shock in the eyes of crew members. The crowd inside the arena erupted into chants, boos, gasps, and roars, some fans on their feet in shock, others with hands over their mouths in disbelief. The commentary team tried to process what had just happened, their voices shaking with urgency as they declared the attack one of the most vicious ambushes in recent memory. Roman Reigns was shown being helped to his feet by medics, clutching his ribs, his breathing labored, his face etched with pain. Word quickly spread that he may have suffered fractured ribs, internal bruising, or even a concussion depending on where the blows landed. Social media exploded with speculation, and wrestling journalists began to push stories that this wasn't just a random outburst. There were whispers that Seth Rollins and his faction, the Vision, might have orchestrated this by giving Brock access to the backstage areas with minimal security. A camera even caught Rollins later in the night speaking into his phone, smirking, and saying cryptic lines about, finally breaking the chokehold of Titans, fueling conspiracy theories that this wasn't just Brock's attack, but a coordinated move to weaken the tribal chief before WrestlePalooza. Later in the show, despite his injuries, Roman refused to stay silent. He demanded a microphone and, leaning on the ring apron with visible pain, made his way onto the stage. His voice was heavy with rage, his tone sharp with defiance, as he addressed Brock Lesnar directly. He called the ambush cowardly, he promised vengeance, and he told the Beast in no uncertain terms that blindsiding the tribal chief backstage was the biggest mistake of his career. The WWE Universe erupted into chants for Roman, the energy electric, as he declared that at WrestlePalooza he would make Brock Lesnar pay for every single blow. Cameras then cut to his bloodline members, Jimmy Uso, Solo Sikoa, Jacob Fatu, who were visibly shaken and furious, their loyalty and anger written on their faces. On the other side of the story, Brock was shown in his locker room, calm, collected, sitting back with satisfaction, his chest still heaving but his smirk telling the story of a man who believed he had just reclaimed his place as the most dangerous man in WWE. The contrast between Roman's battered determination and Brock's cold confidence painted the picture of a war that was only just beginning. What makes moments like this so unforgettable is not just the violence, but the way it's presented. The lighting, the silence before the strike, the crowd's eruption, the replay angles that capture every ounce of pain, and the commentary that frames it as a turning point, all of it makes the story feel real, dangerous, and larger than life. This isn't just an attack. It's the beginning of a feud that will test Roman Reigns like never before. For years he has stood at the top, nearly untouchable, but now he has been made vulnerable, he has been humanized, and that sets the stage for a redemption arc filled with pain, resilience, and revenge. Brock Lesnar vs. Roman Reigns is no longer about titles or bragging rights. It's about betrayal, pride, and legacy. It's about whether the tribal chief can rise from the ashes of humiliation and whether the Beast incarnate can truly re-establish himself as the most feared force in WWE. This is the type of story that defines eras. This is where professional wrestling thrives, blending chaos with emotion, brutality with narrative. And this is why the weeks ahead will be can't-miss television. So if you love deep dives into the biggest moments WWE tries to shock you with, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single update. Because the Brock Lesnar ambush on Roman Reigns isn't just a moment, it's the beginning of a war that could shatter the bloodline, redefine Seth Rollins' faction, and forever change the legacy of the tribal chief. The only questions left now are whether Roman can recover, whether the bloodline can survive, and who will truly stand tall when Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar finally collide on the grand stage. The lights dim on Monday Night Raw and the arena, already buzzing after an intense main event, suddenly shifts into a strange, restless energy. Fans who thought the night was over quickly realize that something bigger is brewing, something that's about to change the entire landscape of WWE. Promos have been cutting deep all night, emotions have been raw, rivalries have been boiling over, but no one in the building, not even the commentary team, is prepared for what unfolds backstage. The cameras switch, the Titantron flickers, and the audience sees Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, striding with authority down the narrow backstage corridors. His walk is confident, shoulders squared, but his eyes tell another story. Behind the calm, there's tension. He's fresh out of the locker rooms, his mind likely on what's next for his bloodline, when out of the shadows, a storm comes crashing down. Brock Lesnar, unannounced, unadvertised, doesn't arrive with music or fireworks. There's no warning roar from the beast incarnate this time. Instead, there's silence, subtle footsteps, and then the ambush. In a flash, Brock explodes, delivering a monstrous strike that drops Roman off guard. A steel chair flies through the frame, crashing into Reigns with devastating force. The attack is savage, unrelenting. Security scrambles from all directions, cameras shake as crews rush to capture the chaos, and fans in the arena gasp, frozen in disbelief as the Titantron shows their tribal chief being torn apart behind the curtain. This isn't just a fight, it's an earthquake shaking the very foundations of WWE storytelling. The big question explodes across social media instantly. What does this mean for Roman Reigns, for the bloodline, and for the entire balance of power in WWE? Brock Lesnar isn't just throwing suplexes tonight, he's throwing grenades into the narrative. If you've followed the tension on recent Raw episodes, this wasn't out of nowhere. Brock and Roman have been circling each other like predators for weeks. Roman has been delivering promos about invincibility, about his dynasty, about the resilience of the bloodline. Meanwhile, rumors out of the locker room suggested that Brock was boiling with frustration, feeling overshadowed by Roman's dominance and wanting more control over his own return. Reports even surfaced that Lesnar wasn't happy with being used as a part-time surprise attraction. He wanted to remind the world, and the locker room, that he's still the beast who breaks champions. Teasers and subtle moments hinted at this explosion. A passing stare, a tense jaw clench, the way Roman glared at the monitor when Brock's name was mentioned, all signs pointed toward something imminent. And tonight, it blew wide open. Roman had been scheduled to cut a live promo in the ring, microphone in hand, ready to address weeks of speculation. But before he could even step into the spotlight, Brock was waiting just beyond the curtain. With no music, no theatrics, Lesnar struck with chilling precision. A brutal chair shot to the ribs, another across the skull, followed by bone-rattling shoulder tackles and maybe even a suplex onto concrete or steel props. The backstage area became a war zone as officials and members of Seth Rollins' faction rushed into the frame, but Brock, satisfied, stepped back into the shadows with a smirk, leaving Roman writhing, clutching his ribs, gasping for air. The production team knew exactly how to frame this for maximum impact. Silence before the attack, then an eruption of chaos. Replays in slow motion showed the chair colliding with Roman's body, the pain etched on his face, Brock's fury, and the frantic scramble of security. Fans in the crowd erupted, some in shock, others roaring in disbelief. Commentators could hardly keep up with the unfolding disaster. The broadcast even cut to commercial before returning with more angles and frantic updates, emphasizing just how dangerous and unpredictable the moment had been. The fallout was immediate. Roman, shaken and battered, was shown being checked by WWE medics. Rumors swirled that he might have fractured ribs, internal bruising, or even a concussion. Meanwhile, whispers grew that Seth Rollins and his faction, the Vision, had orchestrated this attack, possibly giving Brock access to strike at the tribal chief when security was light. Footage even caught Rollins smirking backstage, speaking into his phone, dropping cryptic lines about the chokehold of Titans finally breaking. The conspiracy threads practically wrote themselves, and the narrative twisted into a storm of betrayal and power plays. Later in the show, Roman, bruised but unbroken, insisted on addressing the WWE Universe. Leaning on the ring apron, microphone trembling in his hand, he forced himself onto the stage. His voice shook with pain but carried fury and defiance. He spat venom at Brock Lesnar, declaring that blindsiding him backstage was a coward's move, that the Beast had made a mistake thinking the tribal chief would stay down. Roman promised revenge, not just in passing words, but with fire in his eyes that sent chills through the arena. The crowd erupted in chants for Roman, rallying behind him as he vowed that at WrestlePalooza, Under the lights, Brock Lesnar would pay for every blow. WWE made sure the world understood the gravity. Camera shots showed Roman's bloodline members backstage, their faces heavy with anger and shock. Jacob Fatu, Jimmy Uso, Solo Sikoa, all visibly shaken by the attack, their loyalty tested. On the other side, Brock sat calmly in his locker room, chest heaving, looking almost satisfied with the destruction he caused. The contrast was striking, Roman's vulnerability against Brock's monstrous dominance. This wasn't just a one-night ambush. This was the ignition point for a feud that would define legacies, test alliances, and maybe even shatter the bloodline itself. Production choices elevated it beyond a cheap attack. The sound design, the shadows, the silence before the strike, the crowd's gasps, the chaos after, every detail made the moment feel raw and real. And that's what makes fans buy into the story. This attack, this betrayal, isn't just physical, it's emotional. It makes Roman Reigns, who has towered over WWE for years, suddenly look human. It opens the door for a redemption arc, a story of resilience, pain, and vengeance. And it sets the stage for Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns in a collision that isn't just about titles or dominance, it's about pride, betrayal, and the fight for legacy. This is where professional wrestling thrives, at the intersection of chaos and storytelling. And this is why fans will be glued to their screens in the weeks ahead. So if you love these deep dives into the moments WWE doesn't want you to forget, hit like, smash that subscribe button, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. The Brock Lesnar ambush on Roman Reigns isn't just a shocking moment, it's the beginning of a war. The question now is simple: can Roman recover? Can the bloodline survive? And will Seth Rollins' faction use this chaos to finally shatter WWE's tribal chief?